Hello everyone, welcome back to Not a Real Road Test. This is spring season in Forza Horizon 4 and today I'm going to show you the 2018 Renault Megane RS, the game's shockingly exclusive super hot hatchback. I won this example back in Horizon Series 17, which ran at the beginning of 2020. In this review, we're going to drive this super hot hatch stock, see how we can improve the way it drives, and then drive the better version of itself. I've picked this car today because in the last decade or so, we've had quite the resurgence of hot hatches and super hot hatches, at least in Europe anyway. There were so many of them, at least in the UK, in the 1980s and early 1990s, but they started dropping in popularity because of their tendency to get stolen. It feels like new life has come to the car world with the resurgence of these cars, much like new life comes to the ecosystems in the season of spring. Renault, in my opinion, is a very underrated manufacturer, and the Megane RS is one of my favourite new super hatches, and I want to see if it stacks up that way while driving it as well. I haven't got to drive mine yet, but it looks very promising indeed. The Megane RS has gained a reputation for its handling and track focus amongst the other hot hatches as it spawned multiple generations. Renault Sports indeed are famous for their sheer driving engagement, and the previous gen Megane RS that I have certainly felt that way. That's my briefing of why I've picked the 2018 Megane RS this week. Now let's go and not really road test it. The Megane RS just slips into the Forza A performance class with a performance indicator of 702 in stock form. As you'd expect, it's in the super hot hatched category in Forza, hence it rivals cars like the new Focus RS. The Mark 6 and Mark 7 Golf are the more recent Civic Type Rs, the latest Astra VXR, and the AMG Mercedes A-Class. In real life, those cars that I've mentioned are also rivals, but if we're to be a bit more specific, the front-wheel drive super hatch rivals are the Hyundai i30 and Veloster N, as well as the new Civic Type R and the latest Ford Focus ST. Now, if I were to get ultra-specific, it needs to be compared to the all-new Focus ST from a driving dynamics perspective and the Civic Type R from a distinctive design perspective. The older generations were known for their track and backroad thrills, but not necessarily for their refinement or daily ability. But the new car is in a world of super hot hatches which are designed to be dailied, so Renault have really tried hard on focusing more on that daily ability aspect as well, while keeping the magic that made the old Renault Sport so engaging. So Renault have been focusing more on the daily ability aspect as well. In order to maintain the magic from Sport Meganes of old, this new model gets its fair share of new performance technology and upgrades, starting with the small hike in power over the previous generation, but as is typical these days, with a smaller engine. The new car also gets a four-wheel steering system called 4Control. It works in the following way. Below 37 miles an hour, the system turns the rear wheels in the opposite direction to the front wheels by up to 2.7 degrees. This is to aid agility. Now above 37 miles an hour, or 62 miles an hour if you're in race mode, the rear wheels turn in the same direction by up to 1 degree for increased stability. That's pretty impressive tech for a performance car at this price point. And the shock absorbers feature hydraulic compression stops which, when confronted with bumps, they apply extra damping before the shocks reach full compression. This effectively avoids rebound, which ultimately improves tyre contact with the road, benefiting grip and general settledness. If you spec the dual clutch transmission like this Forza model, you get launch control as well. The engine is an uprated version of the 1.8 litre turbocharged engine that you get in an Alpine A110, which has influences from the Renault F1 team in terms of development. In the latest Megane RS, it produces 280 brake horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 287 pound-feet of torque at 2,400 to 4,800 RPM. That's on the lower end of the power scale in terms of the new super hot hatches, but the Megane's party piece is supposedly its handling on the track with its front wheel drive layout. You get from 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds though, and onto a limited top speed, as is standard, of 155 miles an hour. For swapping cogs, you can spec this 1400 kilo track blitzer with either a 6-speed manual transmission or a 6-speed EDC dual clutch system that I have. The Megane RS in this form is still in production today, and in real life starting prices for a new model are £29,000. Though in Horizon 4 you'd pay 250,000 credits at an auction if you actually see one at an auction. I don't doubt for 1 minute that Horizon 4 citizens actually own these cars, but I very much doubt that they let such an exclusive vehicle go. And I've sadly not seen anyone driving this on the real roads or even on Horizon 4's roads, which is a shame. But I imagine the type of person who'd buy this in the real world would be that middle-aged type who'd yearned for an engaging car to drive for years, but has been consumed over the years by kids and other adult responsibilities. The type of person who used to read about Renault Sports in Evo magazines while in the dentist's waiting room, trying to escape from the reality of their VW Passat TDI or their Ford Focus C-Max. The person who, after years of repression by adulthood responsibility, finally took the plunge and bought one. With all of that in mind, let's go and see how the 2018 Megane RS drives in stock form. Now you can tell that transmission is working very well because it just shifts really quickly as you'd expect from a dual clutch transmission. Honestly, the number of times I hear a 4-pot turbo noise in real life and it's been accompanied by a slick shifting transmission. Hot hatches are really back and I hope they're here to stay. I think as an engine sound it's fine. It's not amazing, but it's better than some of the other 4-cylinder engines I've heard in this game. You can barely hear the turbo wastegate, but you can hear the turbo spinning away. It's quite a responsive engine as well. The responsive engine and responsive transmission go hand in hand. I can definitely see why the Forza edition of this car is the EDC variant rather than the manual, because drive tars don't care about save the manual or any of that stuff that real petrolheads do care about. I do like how quickly you sort of get to the higher gears. I must say, I do like these gear ratios. You can stay in the power band, and obviously being a twin turbo motor, all the power's at the top. But even when you're still getting to the top, you've still got waves of torque. The main zone for this engine is above 3.5k, but comes into its own above 4.5 to 5,000. Turbos have that effect. When you're in that boost zone, it feels like the fastest thing in the world, but outside of that, it's just a bit naff. In a super hatch or just any hot hatch, I think you need to have the slightly shorter gear ratios. It's not for cruising long distance. This is for back roads and tight corners. Now, the Megane RS is front wheel drive. I think in the super hatch world, there's a split between front and four wheel drive, and I can definitely feel that this is more of a front wheel drive car, especially off the line. It's just scrabbling its paws, trying to find grip. But it's not horrendous. Now, at lower speed corners anyway, the front wheels do feel quite busy. The Megane RS is more at home on the wider roads, more open stretches than tight inner city corners. That's more for hot hatches like the Cooper S and the Corsa VXR. When you get into a corner, it's pretty keen to get in there. When you're coming out, it's also fine. It's in the middle, you tend to understeer a bit. It might be because I'm really pushing this car, as I tend to. I don't think we can critique the Megane for that, because most front-wheel drive cars at this price point will do that. But turn-in response, it exists, and it's good. Now, you've got quite a threshold before you reach the grip limit. And when you do reach the grip limit, it's fairly easy to bring back into control. It's hard to set this car. I do have traction control on, but it points where you want it to go. So while I was wrestling back there from left to right, it was responding to my inputs really well. It was going where I asked it to go, even though I didn't have the best intentions. Very obedient. Feels a bit intimidating when you're getting off the line, which is fairly unique for a car under 300 horsepower, but it's very tame. I say tame in the nicest way here. It's approachable and calm when you're at the limit. That was well executed, that J-turn, but it was thanks to the agility and the layout of this Megane RS. In terms of power to handling, it's punching a lot below its threshold. That said, I think hot hatchbacks, that's kind of their mantra. You can get some really powerful ones, I mean, but it's hard to upset them. I think that's what makes them so popular. Sorry, causing vandalism. Not in a Corsa, I shouldn't be doing this. I imagine this car has a fairly stiff setup, because it's not rolling at all. It looks really composed, and speaking of the way it looks, in my opinion, this is probably the best looking super hot hatchback out there. I think the Golf R, you know, it looks clean, if a little boring to me. I mean, I do see them everywhere in this game and in real life. The Civic Type R used to be my favourite in terms of looks, but now I think this car looks better with less effort. With the Civic, there's so many creases and scoops and whatnot, and I still like the way the Civic looks, though not a lot of people do. This, however, is just more effortlessly good looking. I like the tail light design, the front light design, those checkered flag front fog lights, the diffuser, the exhaust. Renaults make fantastic looking cars. I'd love to see more of them on both the Horizon 4 roads and British roads. This certainly lives up to Megane RS's of old, because the previous generation of Megane RS, I've got one of those, and it is a peach. I remember driving it stock for the first time, and I had a similar experience, actually. This is carrying over where that old car left off, because it continues to be really good looking, continues to be a peach in the corners, competently priced as well. It is pretty special in these corners. This is the newest car I've driven so far, and it is probably one of the best handling, I would say. Its handling really does stand out, and I've also driven the latest Focus RS. That's the car I started with in the game. That car was more intimidating. I mean, it does have a drift mode, and it does have more power, all that. The Megane RS, I find, is more agile, more approachable than the Focus RS. It's a shame that they didn't make this a starter car, because I think this is perfect. It's not slow by any means, it's just really controllable. I'm just really impressed with cornering ability here. I'm glad that Renault didn't defer from its philosophy of making its Renault Sports just really engaging. Skims over corners. But remember, we're here to bring cars to their full potential. I don't think this car's at its full potential yet, so let's go and tune it. We're in the tuning shop now. Let's go through what this car's good at. Its strengths are really handling, approachability, and the grip levels are pretty phenomenal as well. And you know, hot hatchbacks of this breed don't have 300mm width tyres, so it's amazing. It's a very fun car to push around, the Megane RS, and it's very predictable as well. Anywhere you point, it will go there, even if you're trying to take it out of control. But the relative lack of power is gapingly obvious to me, because this car handles so well that 280 horsepower doesn't seem enough to really get it to its limits. It takes you a while to actually get to the handling limits of this car. That's part of the point, I think. You always feel in control. The whole purpose of hot hatchbacks and super hot hatchbacks, they're supposed to maintain that approachability, how easy they are to drive, and how good at handling they are, but I guess dialed up with more power. So we need to really put the super in the super hot hatch category here. It's in this car's DNA to crush not just its rivals, but lots of other cars. And it's only going to do that with some more power. Just in case we overload the front diff with too much power, I'm going to give it a race differential as well, which will allow us to configure the settings of the differential such that we don't just torque steer everywhere, or when we're braking there's a weird balance of handling and that kind of stuff. And this car shifts phenomenally quickly. I'm not even sure if we can improve that, but I'm going to throw a race clutch in there as well. And the same with the brakes. It is impossible. I'd be interested to see how much the racing suspension and dampers will influence this car. They'll raise the handling limit even higher, but I think the increase in power will close that gap more. And the Megane RS does feel very light on its feet, so it doesn't deserve weight reduction, bro. I've also adjusted the acceleration differential setting, which is essentially the difference in wheel rotation required to lock the differential under acceleration. I reduced that slightly in an effort to reduce understeer, which is what I felt quite a bit when I hit handling limits. I think a truly well-rounded car should have a neutral feeling rather than understeer or oversteer, and it is a very ideal case scenario when your car feels that way. And being a front-wheel drive car with a biased weight distribution towards the front, that's not going to be possible, but we can always try make it more neutral. So I've selected my new tune. Now let's go and see how the jacked-up version of this Megane RS drives. Now, I will admit, I think this car actually looks better at night time against the bright glitzy colours of the Horizon Festival than it does in the day, and it looks stunning on the day already. It just looks so cyberpunky with these LED headlights and the colourful techie background. Now let's just see how this drives. You want to go, bro? I got showed up there. See, my downshift there was pretty suboptimal, and I wasn't in the proper power band, but I still had enough torque to safely overtake, and the Megane just pushed forwards. See, this is the kind of hope that makes me happy. It is a notable power difference. I mean, what would you expect with an extra 150 horsepower or so? Going uphill is just a much nicer experience, less tedious. With the speeds you're capable of reaching, it almost feels like it can destroy autobahns as well. That's like Super Saloon territory. We are in Super Saloon power territory, to be fair. I think the grip threshold has increased, and I suppose what would you expect with race spec tyres? This car was already very good at gripping and staying stable on the road. And now it feels more invincible. It can take corners at a much faster speed. That is in part due to the tyres, of course, but also the tweaks to the suspension and the roll bars. This is a far more exciting car. Handles beautifully, he says while he takes out a lamppost. Just look at how well it went round that corner at 115 miles an hour. So at the top speed of a Fiat 124, roughly, I was going round that corner, no difficulty at all. This car is just way more enjoyable with the power. I think for the real world, the Megane RS has just the right amount of power for a front-wheel drive car. In this game, though, we can throw all those, norms in the bin, and I think this is the right level of power. I can definitely feel the front tyres working harder because they are pushing 590 Newton meters of torque. They're still doing a great job. If I had given this car more power, and we sort of reached the limits anyway, it would certainly need to be four-wheel drive, which would sacrifice some agility because it would be heavier. But there are lots of trade-offs when tuning cars, so you'd have to trade off low-speed agility for high-speed stability. Yep, that was an awesome near miss indeed. See, new hot hatchbacks and super hot hatches like this one are a lot heavier than their predecessors, but I'm still getting a lot of agility from the Megane RS. That old Golf that was pulling out of the corner, I only saw it last minute and I reacted at the last minute, but I still avoided it, and that was doing really high speeds as well, so that is testament to this car's agility, which has been maintained. I'm not getting any torque steer at low speeds, and I sort of was before, so that's an improvement there as well. The footpath isn't closed anymore, Edinburgh City Council. That's the kind of destructive antics that these cars are made for in terms of this game. You can see the sun reflecting off the metallic orange paint. In terms of car and paint job combos, I love this one. Oh, look at those flames. The old Megane RS I have, I think it's a bit lighter than this. Somehow this feels better to drive. I think it must be the four-wheel steering. It's a fantastic standard feature in a car at this price point. In the real world, that is. I mean, 250,000 credits in this game is a lot. This Megane RS really lives up to its reputation of being agile and predictable and fun and really easy to throw its weight around. And the four-wheel drives in the super hot hatch class just aren't as agile. Although probably a bit more stable at high speeds, I need to drive some more of those four-wheel drive super hatches. Look, all the cars I've driven in the super hot hatch class, including the Focus RS, the old Megane RS, they're really chuckable. But you'd be impressed with this. Everyone knows that the old Megane 250 and the Focus RS, with, you know, all the reviews on the internet about the Focus, especially it's available in North America. This will surprise those who have not heard of it. It deserves your attention. My expectations were high, but even my expectations were beaten, I think. Okay, time for the verdict. Before we introduce mods to the Megane RS, we had a very predictable yet very fun super hot hatch that was just very agile and would punch its way around corners with brilliant levels of grip and stability. However, it felt a little bit sluggish at times, especially at higher speeds on the steeper hills. After visiting the tuning shop, then came a thorough investment in all performance areas, but it was most notably the power hike of 140 brake horsepower that transformed the car from a reasonably fast but fantastically agile super hatch into a surprisingly swift, corner-dominating performance machine with its cat-like reflexes. Hot hatches are meant to inject some passion and performance expertise into the highly usable body shape that is the hatchback. Super hot hatches, however, take that to a league above by being capable of attacking corners at even more eye-watering speeds, making them astonishingly well-rounded vehicles. Not only did the mods add more super to this super hot hatch, they made the RS awesome enough to worry even some of the super saloons of similar power levels. The RS started out as less powerful than its rivals, and it was noticeable, especially when you compare it to the latest Focus RS and Audi RS3, but it's a winner in the handling department against those all-wheel drive rivals and even the front-wheel drive rivals too, like the old Focus RS. And you'd hope so too, given the innovative four-wheel steering system and the hydraulic compression stops in the dampers. The chassis was clearly designed to cope with more power, and I brimmed it just before that power started to overflow beyond the sweet spot. It just demonstrates the point that it's far easier to fix a power deficit than to fix subpar handling. Despite not having driven all of the super hatches, I can confidently say that this super hatch will be one of the most agile, if not the most agile. I guess one day I'll have to pit it against the Hyundai Veloster N and the latest Honda Civic Type R to find out. It's definitely an improvement over its predecessor, the 2010 Megane RS 250, which also nailed its philosophy. A great shame then that the RS is not as readily accessible as the other cars in its class, being an exclusive. If you are lucky enough to nab one at an auction, you'll pay hundreds of thousands of credits for the privilege. This is amusingly similar to the Puma Racing that I not really road tested last time. It's an exclusive car that's more agile than a lot of its rivals, but it costs your driver's arm and leg to actually buy. The Megane RS is less exclusive in real life compared to the Puma Racing, but it's a lot more car than the Puma, as you'd expect, being 20 years newer. So it's a lot easier to justify the RS as a purchase. In fact, I would urge you to get one of these if you can find one at an auction, and you can savour it for every moment you hoon it, and you'll hoon it regularly. The song I've picked to describe the vibe I felt while driving the RS was Fragments of Time by Daft Punk, featuring Todd from their 2013 studio album Random Access Memories. The sound behind the song is more mature than you'd expect, but you can tell it's a Daft Punk song in the same way that this latest Megane RS has been forced to grow up more in order to seem more appealing against its rivals in the real world. And the Random Access Memories album as a whole is a bit more controversial to die-hard Daft Punk fans, who might see it as a bit too much of a deviation from their roots, though of course it's more agreeable amongst more mainstream listeners. The song and the album both reflect on Daft Punk's funky and at times rocky roots to gather inspiration, but they also look to the future to present themselves in a fresher form. And the other parallel is you can really see and feel the differences between the Megane R26R from the mid-2000s and the next generation of Renault Sport Megane, the RS250. But the gap between the RS250 and this RS that I've driven today is an even bigger gap, and that's similar to how different Random Access Memories is to the first 3 Daft Punk studio albums. You can tell that each album is evolving. I'm not saying that each album is better than its predecessor, but there is a certain musical evolution there. It's quite different, bringing me back to how much more grown-up and dailyable the latest Megane RS is. This car's truly special, and it wanted to keep me in it as well. So, this was the 2018 Renault Megane RS. This super hatch all-rounder is ideal for the racing and street racing series, and the song that got me into the vibe of driving it was Fragments of Time by Daft Punk featuring Todd Edwards. If you have any suggestions for cars you'd like to see me not really road test, please suggest them in the comments. Thanks for watching!